Downtown Nashville's live music scene is crazy. Not only is it an integral part of our city's economy, but full-time musicians playing down there can make anywhere from tens of thousands to six figures a year playing these cover shows. Today's guest is someone who went from touring artist to director of entertainment, responsible for booking up to 380 shows a week for Nashville in some of the biggest clubs. And guess what? He still releases killer music. I want you thinking about your own life and your journey with music as you listen to today's guest. Let's jump in. Welcome, guys, to another episode of Benny's Booth, and today we've got my good friend Jer Gregg here. Jer, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Benny. Appreciate it.
And we are rocking the same kind of kicks here.
Hey, we got 'em.
I've got my Jer Dunks. You actually gave these to me.
Those are Jer Dunks. Custom Benny 1 of 1 Jer Dunks. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, quick disclaimer, guys. You're going to want to watch this one with a box of tissues next to you because Jer has been on a wild ride, and I think it's extremely inspiring. It's very encouraging, and it just speaks to what someone who loves music, who is a musician at heart, will do in order to live their dream, man? So we've had a lot of talks, and when you talk about what you've been through and overcome, I'm like, man, I'm tearing up right now, man.
Yeah.
It's been crazy.
It's an interesting story as it starts to unfold, and I never really thought about it much. Over the years, I'd be like, oh, this happened to me, or this happened, or I did this, or did that. But, I'm coming up on, it'll be 19 years in Nashville this November, and to think about that. And I just saw my parents this past weekend, and was saying that, and my cousin had come over with them as well. They come to watch me play, and I was like, man, can you believe 19 years down here? He's like, you're doing it. That's what he said. He's like, you're doing it, man. You're doing it. And I kind of sometimes wonder, like, did they ever think I would be here for almost 2 decades, or something like that?
Would your parents ask you, like, hey, when you coming back, or anything like that?
I think early on, there were probably moments that, mom was like, are you doing okay? What are you thinking? How are you feeling about this? And then definitely there was a moment when I had vocal surgery and, before I had vocal surgery and I had the voice loss, and nobody really knew what was wrong with me for about 6 months. And I remember at a point that mom was like, okay, are you ready to come home now? And she didn't mean it in a bad way. I think she meant it in a motherly, it's okay. We can, think this thing through and see what's next. Do you need more help doing this or whatever it was? And that actually was the trigger for me to go, nope, I'm not coming home.
Whoa.
It was absolutely, I remember almost like snapping in that moment, be like, hell no, I was probably a little bit of a jerk, but like, I was like, that's what hit me. It was the 2x4 up against the side of the head that was like, you can't go home now. Now you have to stay and figure it out.
And what was going through your head as you're thinking that? Is it like imagining what your life would be like if you went back home?
Yep.
Or okay.
Yep, 100%. And not that I have anything against where I grew up. I actually really love the small town that I grew up in. It's called Elwood, Indiana. It's about an hour north of Indianapolis. Okay. And literally the water tower says heart of the Hoosier land. Okay. And if you look at it on a map, it's just like, just off center, just a hair. And to go to this small town where we did have some stoplights. Some of the other places around didn't have some stoplights, but it's a lovely little town. It was small growing up. There wasn't really much to do. And honestly, I went back in August and was visiting with some folks. And I was like, wow, this town's kind of it had a little coffee shop, it had little, my friend, Brandy, she had a really awesome tattoo shop that she built out, and one of the biggest tattooers around in the area of all places, and all this stuff. I'm like, wow, this little town has come a long ways, and we definitely grew up in a community, that really did support music too. But I don't think that is where I want to live. You know what I mean? I want to be around musicians every single day.
Yep.
from sun up to sundown, wherever that is, on Music Row, or if it's on Broadway, or rehearsal studios or whatever, in the recording studio. Even here, at Singing Success, being around people all the time, it helps you stay inspired and keeps you going. So going back home was not really the option for me because I knew that I didn't have that back home.
Was there a live music scene growing up, though, in your hometown?
You know what's crazy? We had a hell of a live music scene, but out of the blue. It was there were so many bands in our little town, and you're talking about a town of like 5,000 people, maybe max. I graduated with like 120 kids, and there was music around there. I mean, you're talking about 90s, early 2000s, and everybody wanted to play a guitar. I don't see that as much anymore. It's a lot different, but back then everybody just had to play a guitar and play in somebody's basement or play in somebody's garage, and we were all about the same age. But I remember, I was playing in bands with friends since I was like 12 years old. We didn't even know what we were doing. Our first band was called the Scarati Kids. Because ska was big, but we never even wrote any music. We just said we were a band, And yeah. I don't know who came up with it. Probably my buddy Chad.
So you guys were like, Sublime fans?
Yeah. Ska was huge. So like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Sublime. But what was the, was it Less Than Jake? I think Less Than Jake had horns in their band and stuff too. So we were like, we're going to be a ska band. But
did you guys have horns?
No.
Okay.
No, we were more just like little ragtag punk kids, trying to. We're like, we're going to make a band name, and now we're going to play music. And we didn't even. I don't even think there was even songs written for that. But around that time, so like there were several people that were playing guitars, and Blink-182 had really just come out, and I mean. That was when that Dude Ranch record really had come out. Was that 97-ish or something like that? That Third Eye Blind first album, 1997. Man, that I was 13. I was 12 or 13 years old. That was the heyday of alternative rock, post grunge, right? Yep. Really cool stuff. Matchbox 20. That's where like I think some of the music had started to shift into. Instead of poetic, more style songwriting, rock and roll, grunge music, it started to kind of get some more stories put in there, closer to what we hear now in modern music today. There's a lot more storytelling in rock and roll, pop, country, and all that. But needless to say, back to in that little hometown, there was this energy, and I think because we didn't have anywhere to go, there was nothing to do. We had 2 bowling alleys in my hometown, which is wild. But everybody went to the bowling alley every weekend or whatever. And one of my first gigs was playing on the lanes. They put like a tarp down, and that was one of my shows. My very first gig, like full band gig, was at the YMCA.
No kidding.
Yeah. It was at the
YMCA. At the bowling alley, was everyone on their own lane, like every band member, or how?
No, that like section of where you can stand before you actually bowl. Yeah. They kind of put like a tarp down there, so you don't want to screw that up. We probably had to wear bowling shoes, who knows? But like they laid that out, and that was how they had the little stage set up, which was cool. It was an opportunity, you know what I mean? You just played wherever you could.
And they tend to have disco balls too, don't they? The bowling alley.
Did.
So that's killer lighting.
Yeah. Yeah. What do they call that? Like not the neon bowl or something like that. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, they probably did. Hold on, get the spotlight. There's a guy with a flashlight up there. But yeah, I think out of necessity, there was a need for people to want to play music, and there was a need for these things to happen. And especially because we lived in rural America. I grew up in a log cabin in the woods, legitimately a 200-year-old log cabin in the woods. And bro, your brain is like going,
yeah.
Have I ever told you that?
I heard you mention it one time, and I was like, I have to think about this later, man,
Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
a lot to take in. So yeah, this is the perfect time. Did you have like mortar between the logs, or how did?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah. So it's real concrete now, but back in the
okay.
day, it used to be like mud and horsehair and all that stuff that they would pack together in between these logs and all that stuff. But my dad is a real outdoorsman. He loves being outside, and he loves the woods and he loves country music and. He's a Hoosier hillbilly for sure. Like if you hear my dad talk, you'd be like, "Are you from Alabama or are you from Tennessee?" He's got a really thick Southern accent. He's just kind of always been a hillbilly himself. But he loved log cabins and honestly, one of his favorite movies was Robert Redford, Jeremiah Johnson, and that's what I'm named after.
Wow.
And he was, I think he was a Civil War deserter that lived in a log cabin in the woods. So
Crazy.
there's some little consistencies there, but yeah, he found this log cabin in southern Indiana and had it torn down and put on a flatbed trailer and drove it up to our town of Elwood and bought some property and some acreage on the backside of a conservation club. So it's you're driving through the Midwest. There's a lot of cornfields, soybean, all of that. Yeah. But you'll see these patches of trees, right? Like these little tiny forests or whatever. And so that was where he bought some land there and dropped the log cabin down on the holler over there, So
That's amazing. Now,
yeah, and they still live there. They still live in the log cabin up there in Elwood.
dude, I have so many questions about it.
Yeah.
But like growing up, when I was in middle school, we like moved to a smaller home. And so for a small period of time, my brother, sister, and I were sharing a room. All three of us,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a small place, and then some friends knew it. And so, like kids are going to make fun of each other. So
Yeah.
I'd have a buddy like who would walk a couple of steps and go, I just walked the length of Benny's house.
Dang.
But
Ruthless.
yeah. Oh yeah. Like middle
When your
school
kids are ruthless.
dude, middle schoolers are savage. I was one of them too though.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but did anyone poke fun at you being in a log cabin? Was everyone else in a
Yeah, I mean, we were. I don't know how to say this in retrospect. Like there were doctors and lawyers and stuff, and people that had bigger jobs, more important jobs, if you will, that kind of lived in the area where we lived. And I don't think that we were underprivileged by any means. My parents always took care of us and stuff, but we were definitely shopping at Shoe Carnival. And everybody else was getting the Nikes and stuff like that, and we were getting the Filas and the Pumas, or the starter jacket. The starter jacket was a big thing back then, to have all that. So it definitely never really felt like we always fit in, but it also wasn't a matter of, we were less than or anything like that. It was kind of like these outsiders over here. They live in a log cabin over here,
I didn't feel like that. And if anyone did kind of poke fun, I'm just curious about your childhood a little bit.
Yeah.
Would you let them paws fly? Would people throw down?
Oh gosh, I had a bad temper.
Okay.
I had a bad temper. So I did get picked on a lot, but I was also I was a bigger, chubbier kid. They called it husky when we were growing up. That's
a good word for it.
I still joke about that. Still joke about that. I'm like, do they still have a husky boys department? Because that's where I shopped. And it's true. And we have a pit bull husky dog, and so I'm like, every time I think the husky, I'm like, I was a husky, you're a husky,
Yeah.
But I definitely got picked on when I was little. I was a little chubbier kid, a little bit on the bigger side, and then I was also Noah's little brother. Noah's my older brother, and when you're you're the little brother, or you're this or that, I definitely got picked on, and people knew how to push my buttons. And you can ask my parents. Like, I think I spent most of third grade in the principal's office and in detention and stuff like that. What's funny now is I'm really good friends with my second grade school teacher, Vicki Savage, and she loves following my career and everything that I've been doing over the years. And she's told me, she was like, I saw something in you when you were a kid. Like, I just knew there was something about it. I'm like, 7 years old? That's, mind blowing,
Yeah.
but also grateful and thankful too, that somebody knew that, like, hey, this kid is inspired by other things that most people aren't. So yeah, I did get picked on a little bit when I was growing up, and I would throw down and get in trouble. But I've tried to curb that over the years.
Totally. Yeah. We've chatted about some crazy stories with regard to that, but maybe we'll get into them. But the background story, I think, is so interesting because a lot of musicians have a similar background. You realize really early on that you do not fit the mold that it seems like a lot of people are comfortable fitting.
That's true.
Like, you don't want to, like, homework is just so painful. It's hard to pay attention in school, but you've got this talent for music, you've got this creativity, so there is like a spark in you to do something really productive.
Yeah.
But it's not academics.
Yeah.
So did you know growing up, like, right away that I'm not going to go to college and do all these kind of things?
I did the best that I could, and before knowing what clinical testing was or anything for kids with ADD or stuff like that, and I knew my parents didn't want to be doping me up,
Yeah.
and not like, I've had plenty of friends that were on Ritalin and stuff, because Ritalin was the thing then. It wasn't Adderall.
I remember.
And I think that they were scared of that. I've never actually really talked to them about it, but I think that they were also kind of scared of, like, I don't know if I want to put my kid on a drug. They're only, 9, 10 years old or 12, like, they're just a kid, let them be. But I definitely had a problem. And I knew that. And I've talked to my parents about it now. I'm like, if there were, clinical testing back then, or even psychologists to have talked to about, like, my anxiety and management of anger and things like that, the way I managed it later on in life, was to be in fear of getting in trouble. That was how I tried to manage that. And I was like, I probably wasn't the greatest way of doing those things. That built up animosities towards other stuff. But it would be painful sitting in class, and it would feel like it had been an hour and a half and only 20 minutes has gone by on the clock. One of the classes that I did really well in, though, was math. I've always been really good with math, and I loved it. But you're also talking, this is small algebra and stuff. But when I went to trade school, I didn't go to college.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, to be a tool and die maker, to work on machines and metal and stuff like that.
No
This gets into
kidding.
the creativity part. So I ended up doing trigonometry in that, which is basically triangles, right, and getting angles and all that stuff. And I remember it being so easy to me when I was doing that in college. But when I was in school, I just wanted to play guitar, or I wanted to paint, or I wanted to draw. I drew all the time. My brother as well. He's a creative director. And he does art for a living, basically. He works for an ad agency in Indianapolis, and he's done so many wild things. The guy is a genius. He's done every show poster for me, every album cover art, everything. That's all my brother that's done all that stuff.
I've wondered who does it because it always looks so nice and professional. So it's your brother.
Yeah, it's my brother. It's Noah. Ever since we were kids, like he was making the show posters and making, like, the little stickers to put on the demo CDs and stuff. And he played guitar first. And that was kind of how I picked up the guitar, was because Noah had a guitar, but he played sports. I didn't play sports. So when he was off playing, basketball or football, I go pick up his guitar, and it was kind of like that scene in, it was when it was my 12th, when I was 12 years old, it was Christmas that year. And I got an acoustic guitar from a J.C. Penney's catalog, and I could already play the chords. And it was like that scene in Step Brothers, like, I knew you touched my drum set. Like, how do you know how to play that guitar already? I knew you, like.
He goes, why are you sweating? He goes, oh, I'm just watching Shark Week.
Yeah, Cops. Yeah,
Cops.
Yeah. Just watching Cops. But yeah, there were definitely points of, like, I was already trying to write songs at 12. I was already trying to create, and I was trying to draw. I was drawing band logos. I was just making up stuff, and I was like, that was what was really cool to me. And I think part of that was seen by my parents, and my dad, was kind of like, you gotta have some kind of future. And they never knew what to do with the music stuff. They really didn't. They were just like, I don't know what, and I've said this even recently, like, when asking them or telling them, they're like, what are you looking for? What are you trying to do? And like, they don't know anything about publishing deals, record deals, or how these things work or what it is and all of that. And I remember at a point that there was kind of a moment that was like, Jer, we wish we could help you, but we just can't. And that was probably over 10 years ago when I had that conversation, probably 15 years ago at some point. And I already knew that, So that's why I was like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm here doing this thing, because I gotta figure out how to do it. Nobody was around to tell me how to do it and what the next step was, which kind of leads me into what I do today professionally for other people is I learned the hard way. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to do this. You don't, hey, if you're going in this path, here's the outcome. I have seen so many forks in the road because of things that I have been up against that I'm very much the person now is like, take it from me, man. You don't have to do that. Or this is where you should go here, or, you're headed in a bad direction. But I think that figuring that out at an early age of going, I definitely was going to do something creative, but my parents and my dad was like, okay, well then let's put you in a trade. You need to learn a trade. You need to have a backup plan. That's what he'd always say. You need a backup plan. And that leads me to now, I got a tattoo on my wrist that says, plan your work, work your plan. It's something my dad has always said. And my brother drew that too.
That's so cool,
but
man.
Like, he would always say, plan your work and then work your plan. That's what you got to do. You got to have a plan for everything. And now I have like a plan A, B, C, and D, for a lot of things.
Yeah, the math thing is kind of no surprise to me. And the plan thing is kind of no surprise because you are one of the most prepared people I know for literally everything. And anytime people talk about doing anything, you're the kind of person to be like, so how are you going to do it? And you're saying like, are you doing this, doing that kind of thing? So,
yeah.
And I admire that about you because I've not been that person in general in life. It's like, I hate preparing for anything.
Yeah.
Even when it's something I like, it's like, let me just show up and do the work when I get there kind of thing. But
there can be a little pre-show anxiety with that, right? You're like, oh, do I have, or you get into the zone and you're like, okay, now I'm in the zone and I can figure out what's next. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely the before that because I don't like surprises. I like control or a controlled environment in some way, in some way. Like, I don't like, I can control parts of my show, but then there's parts of it that I can't control that I love. And I can start doing more crowd work with that and building different things out of this show because of the different variables that just show up as things go,
But if anyone watched your show, they would not know that was like planned or rehearsed in any sort of way because it's so smooth and it just comes off like this guy is like on it and he's so creative, like all the different moments you bake into your show. Like,
that's awesome.
Well, I don't want to give them away, but they're just really awesome moments. They just, if you're watching this, you got to come down to Nashville and see Jer live.
Come check it out.
Yeah, follow him and so you can see when he's playing. But so your parents, did they ever make you feel bad about wanting to pursue music?
No, not. I don't want to say intentionally. There was one moment that was a very fueling moment for me, and even now I know that my dad doesn't even really remember the moment, but. And this is no shade to him or anything like that, but I have to speak about it. I've spoke about it several times, but there was a moment I think I was 15 and I had my learner's permit and it was in the middle of a winter type thing and we needed to go to band practice. And, so he was letting me drive, but the snow was bad and everything. And I couldn't really control the car that well. And we were driving on these country roads and stuff and pulled over and he's like, well, we can't do this or whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's not safe, and me, I'm just a kid. I'm like, I got to get to band practice. And he kind of snapped in a moment and was like, hey, I'm going to tell you this. It's only ever going to be a hobby. You're never going to do anything with that to make a living. And you need to understand that right now, And that was a moment. And like I said, I don't think he even remembers that at all because we've talked about it. And I think that was just a parenting moment that he was trying to get the kid to calm down because we were in a dangerous spot, you know what I mean? And all I cared about was me and playing music, you know, with my friends. And, uh, and that was kind of a turning point for me of like, I'll show you, you know, like for me, it was fuel for the last 2 decades, right? Or 3 decades really at that point almost. And for him, it was just trying to protect me, to try to make sure that I didn't do anything that was going to be bad for my life or anything like that. My mom's side of the family has her dad was a musician. He was a country music artist, and then her older sister, she was a singer in bands, and then her older brother played guitar and he played in bands, and then his son played in bands. So I had this musical side of the family over there, but there's also a lot of turmoil on that side of the family too. There was a lot of alcoholism, drug addiction, and things like that. And that is what he was worried about. He saw musicians and he saw problems over here, and he's like, I don't want that for my kid. So I know that now. At the time, I didn't. You know, 15 years old, I was like, this guy's just telling me no, I can't do this. I'll show you. You know. So it was definitely that was really the only point. But when I got down here, I moved when I was 23, and it was probably between 25 and 27, probably closer to 27. I think that they saw so much progress with how I was playing and starting to travel and starting to tour and starting to record more songs and put this music out. And those proud factors really came up, and they're like, man, this kid's really doing it, you know? And even more so now, I know that they're undoubtedly proud of me and everything that I have done and everything that I've been through to do what I want to do with my life. And that's huge, you know. I don't take stock in any of that stuff when you're younger, and it's a developmental stage of things. Yeah, could they haunt you and hang around for a while? And they did. For me, they did. They fueled a little angrier side of me, but also now, retrospectively, even in the last 10, 15 years, I've been able to look at it and go, no, that was just good parenting trying to help me be a good person while taking my journey to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And my life was creativity and music. You know?
Yeah.
So
You can't blame them for that.
No.
But that would haunt me, that kind of statement. And I had, teachers say some things like that growing up, especially because I was in this program in high school that was meant to prepare you for your college applications, prepare you for college.
Yeah.
And probably my sophomore and junior year, especially, I'm like, I definitely do not want to go to college.
Yeah.
I just don't. And then I ended up going for a little bit, not immediately after, but
I never really had the college. I kind of had a college experience because my brother went to school 30 minutes over at Ball State University in Muncie, and in Muncie, Indiana. And that's where all our friends went. So we were like 30 minutes from home, and he was only a grade ahead of me. So we'd go over there and, the house parties, and we played a lot of shows, and we did a lot of that. So by proxy, I had a college experience, but I never lived in a dorm or anything. And when I actually went to trade school, I was living at home in Elwood, and I would have to drive down to downtown Indianapolis, which was an hour and 10-minute drive one way. And then I'd work at the Castleman Square Mall. I worked at a Journey shoe store, and then I ended up working at Hot Topic for a day, and then I ended up working at the Fossil. It was one of the first clothing stores that Fossil had opened, back there in the early 2000s stuff. But I would go down there. It was like a job though. Shop class opened at 8:00 in the morning. It started at 8, and our shop class was 4 hours. It was till 12. Then we got a break. Then we did one or two little classes in the afternoon. That it wasn't even English or social studies or anything like that. It was like drafting and stuff it was really just trade school, And then I'd go work a job. Then I'd go play a gig and do this. I was kind of around school, but I was almost like working a full-time job to get through trade school. And my goal was get through this so that you can do the stuff that you want to do. That was my entire goal.
Just more music is what was on your mind.
But I was good at it too. I was good at the trade, because it was the way that a friend had told me in high school. We had a vocational school, or we do have a vocational school in my little hometown. And for those people watching, a vocational school that has like different trades that you can do, whether that's auto body, print shop. I think over here in our hometown now, I think they have like nursing, and they have some kind of criminal justice too now. Like they have all this. It's one of the bigger vocational schools in Indiana. So kids from all over, from different counties, come over to go to trade school there, and I was lucky enough it was right there. So I went to the shops, went to machine shop class there, and a friend was like, I saw him like leaving class, and they're like, what are you doing? Because it wasn't building trades. I knew about building trades, which was like the construction stuff. And he's like, well, I do the machine shop class. And I was like, well, what's that? And he's like, the first thing he said, it's like modern day blacksmithing. You make stuff out of metal, or you make these things that make stuff out of metal, or you make these things that, plastic injection molding. I'm like, what's that? And he goes, everything. Your toothbrush, your bumper on your car, to, anything that's made out of plastic is a plastic injection mold. So you have to make the mold, and they put the plastic in it. And I'm like, that's awesome. You're making things. Like immediately my mind, the creative mind was like, I can make anything I want. Sick, So I did that, and I did really well in it. So well that I had scholarships that sent me, and then paid for most of my trade school, and paid for my tools and stuff like that. When I was 16, Shannon Carson was our teacher in there, and he instead of just giving us jobs to drill holes or to shape blocks or to mill and do all that, he was getting small jobs from smaller machine shops that they didn't want to do stuff, and then was using that money to fund the program. It was incredible. And I drew and made these universal ball joint holders. He had me draw them and make them.
So you were doing real work.
Yes. And then when I go to trade school, they're like, drill a hole, mill this block. And I hated it, because I'm like, where's the creativity? And I started to find my way around that. Like I made a diamond plate aluminum pick guard out of a CNC machine, for my Strat. I'm like, this is going to be sick.
Oh, that's so sick.
Yeah. I think there's still a picture of me at the school, like holding up my guitar, like with the diamond plate pick guard on it and stuff.
Oh, and to this day, you still mod everything that you have. Your guitars are the coolest.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. So what?
Sorry for the tangents.
No,
on that.
No,
yeah,
man.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
The tangent is the journey, man. I learned that from Brett Manning. So if you,
I love that. Yeah.
So you're killing it at trade school. You're in Indiana. What made you decide to go to Nashville?
Well, there were some friends that were like, hey, we're all going to move to California and LA. We should all get a house together and do this. And it was really people that just like loved music, some friends, a girlfriend of mine that I used to go to a bunch of concerts with and stuff. And we were all friends growing up. And she's like, well, let's go to LA and stuff. And I remember thinking about it. And I was like, well, we could probably do this with like 4 or 5 or 6 people if we all moved and we all got a house and we did all that. But then I was like, I already knew that was going to be a life of working several jobs to try to make some sort of scratch, not even a dent, in an opportunity-based land with a lot of nepotism and a lot of money, family money behind that, and like all of these things that, like, how are you going to compete with that, Jer? And then I thought about that for New York. I'm like, that's the same, and sorry, I said.
That's all right. You use sentence enhancers.
Yeah.
I've got a beautiful 1,000 hertz tone that'll just go right over that.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, New York, same thing. And then I was vacationing in Tennessee with my family. We've been going to Dale Hollow Lake, just north of Cookeville, since my dad was like 9 years old. And we were down staying at one of the rental houses or whatever down there for the week. We always go a full week in July. And a buddy called me and he's like, "Hey, you're down in Tennessee, right? I've got a gig in Nashville." A buddy from Indianapolis, and he was like, "We're coming through. We need an opener. Would you want to come over?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So I like borrowed mom's car or rented a car. I can't even remember at this point. And I drove over and I played this little gig for maybe 12 people. And there was a girl that I knew from a Facebook group in MySpace, right? This is dated, dude.
Throwback.
And she'd come out and met me over there, and she's like, "You ever been to Tin Roof?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" And it was right next door because this place was on Demumbrian Street. And she's like, "You got to come in here." And so I walked into Tin Roof, and this is where things changed for me. I walked in, and Tin Roof just was a shotgun hallway bar at the time. It didn't have these other rooms. It didn't have the front patio area, nothing. It was just like you walked in and went straight back. And I remember walking in, and the dudes looked like they were 7, 8 feet tall, jacked. All the chicks were, like movie stars,
Yeah.
like blonde hair, blue eye, beautiful women. I was just like, I literally felt like this tall walking through, like going like, what? And then get to the back, and there's a band on stage, and everybody looks like Keith Urban. And they're playing something like "Don't Stop Believing" or, "Living on a Prayer." So I knew it wasn't their song, but they were crushing it more than I'd ever heard a cover band play music. And everybody in that back room was just bouncing off the walls, loving this music. And that was the moment I knew I had to move. I was like, "You got to go."
Yeah.
There is something inspiring here. People actually really love live music, because that was also a time in the early 2000s where clubs started popping up, right? And DJs really got heavy, and the cover bands were almost non-existent, especially in Indianapolis. There was a heavy music scene in Indianapolis of original music, whether that was rock, pop, metal, hip hop.
Was there country?
There was some country, way more now because country is so much more accepted now. But if you played covers, you were almost shunned. It was not cool to play covers unless you did a really cool artistic arrangement of a cover. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of making it your own version kind of thing.
So you being in a cover band was not really accepted, but you doing, an artistic version of a cover was accepted, and you threw one or two of those in your set. You know what I mean? So to be around that, and it was all based on original music in Indianapolis, which is awesome too. Like it really did feel like this little, maybe Seattle or something. I don't know. But it was so much cooler to come down here and see you can play anybody's song and you're very accepted. And that was where I was like, I just really love the energy. So a couple months later, I packed up my things, and that was July 2007. And I think I was 22 at the time. And then I turned 23 in late July. And then I moved November 10th, 2007 from Elwood, Indiana to Nashville, Tennessee. And I lived in Hermitage. It's my first apartment.
And how did you find that place?
I think I came down like another month later, like in August or something like that, August or September, and I drove around and found a little apartment and was like, well, this is close enough to town. And I didn't know anything. I really didn't know anything. I didn't know anybody, nothing. And I just was like, I guess I'll just go.
And so you move here. Did you have a clear picture of what you wanted to do, or was it just like, I know that my next steps are in Nashville?
Absolutely not. I had no clue what was next. I just knew, and I spent that summer working on my first EP that you can't find it now. I've since pulled it down, but I'll probably re-release it later or whatever. I wanted to give some breathing room to some of the newer music that I've been putting out, and kind of bundle that stuff together, later. Here, 30 years ago or 20 years ago, I did this or whatever it was. Yeah, it'll be 20 years next year, right? So anyways, I was working on that. So I had this that was like my business card. I had like these songs And I had this idea of what I was doing. And it was very Southern rock. It was very rock and roll, but very Southern rock.
Who are some artists that you were kind of adjacent to?
I think that there was probably a lot of Black Crowes, a lot of Tom Petty. Also, some of the bands, the record that I really loved at the time was Us and Them by Shinedown. That's kind of this real trucker rock and roll blues rock. I know I get flack for this all the time, but one of my favorite Metallica records is Load, and it is blues rock. And I don't care what anybody says, it is blues rock. That album is blues rock. So it's got these Southern things to it, but it's heavy. That's still me.
Yeah.
Like it hadn't really changed, but and the Crows, like that's just blues rock, you know what I mean? I love the Black Crowes so much. But that was kind of where my sound had kind of lived. And so I get down here, and so I've got some things to show some people or whatever it is. And that was all I knew. I just knew that I was Jer Gregg and I was an artist. And the one thing that I knew when I was young, especially being an artist then, was like I had this insane rock and roll voice. That was just it. I mean, it would just make the paint melt off the walls. You know what I mean? It was ferocious. It was gnarly. And I just knew that was the one thing about myself that I was 100% confident about. Everything else about me, I was not confident about at all. I wasn't confident about my songwriting. I wasn't confident about the clothes I was wearing. I wasn't doing anything other than that. You put a microphone in front of me and you gave me the right songs, and it was like, what? So I just came down here and I was like, I guess I'll just figure out what music's going to do. And I worked at a TJ Maxx, and then I worked at Target, and then I worked at American Eagle. I worked anywhere I could just find a job. And then eventually a girl who was from an adjacent town of where I grew up, she was from Frankton, Indiana, only about 10, 15 minutes away. She was living in Nashville, and we kind of connected on, early social media. And she needed like a guitar player or something. And I was trying to make chords. I didn't know anything about guitar. I never had taken a music lesson ever. And fast forward, I took my first music lesson in this building with Paul Allen playing guitar at 39 years old. So that's kind of crazy. So anyways.
But as a good player.
I learned over the years. Yeah. But obviously. But even then, I didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, so I'm playing guitar for this girl, trying to figure this out. And she was like asking me, I think she was asking me like what I did, where do you work or something like that. And I told her, and she was like, you ever thought about bar backing? And I was like, what's that? And she's like, you just stock the bar for bartenders, and you kind of get in the way of, grooming to be a bartender. And I'm like, man, that'd be really cool because I like bars. I thought about it. I'm like, dang, I like drinking. I like bars. I can make money there. That kind of leads me into another portion of my journey that we can talk about later. But because I spent 15 years bartending after that. And so I get in there, and that was when I started working at Sambuca, which just recently closed like about a year or so ago or whatever. But that kind of got me into the bar world, which is now kind of in the world that I have been in for almost 2 decades now of hospitality and live music and blending those things together. So that was kind of my little journey to start it out. And then I just was working at a bar, and I would meet musicians every day. And I would meet famous people all the time too, but I didn't even know they were famous because I didn't know anything about country songwriters and credits and producers and stuff and all those things till many years later. It was very strange, but I knew somehow, I knew in the back of my mind, I was like, everybody here doing this is going to be at a bar, and you gotta be at a bar all the time to meet people in this town, to network and stuff like that. And so I was like, let me just be at one permanently. How many days a week can I be at one? And not have to spend money at it, even though my nights off, I was going to other bars and hanging out and stuff like that too. But it was, there was something in the back of my mind telling me that like, you really should be around this. This is going to help you somehow.
Yeah.
And it really did. It really did. Strangely enough, working in a bar had opened so many other doors for me in my music journey.
Yeah, you understand hospitality better than anyone. But before we get into that, because I think that'll be a huge topic for us, when you and I first met, it was obviously our first lesson, and we go through a bunch of exercises, and at the end, I have you sing for me, and I was like, dude, are you releasing original music? Because you sound like a star. And even in that moment, like obviously you were still rehabbing parts of your voice, but I could tell this guy's a phenomenal singer who is just rehabilitating from vocal damage, uh, which is a story we'll get into in a second. But I'm just thinking about that rock star voice that you're talking about when you were younger, because you sent me some videos when you were playing, I think, in Scotland. And it was insane, like you said, like definitely paint melting off the walls.
I think I was drunk in that video, playing one-handed, chugging a Guinness, and like keeping time. And I'm like, how did you do that?
Dude, you were an absolute beast. When you sent those to me, I was like, this makes sense. This is part of the lore. So I'm really curious about this because we've kind of been chronological this whole time. Like OCD mind is like, let's keep it chronological. So sorry for kind of forcing that. No. So you get to Nashville, you've got this killer voice. You know that it's a phenomenal voice. And then I know that you've toured in different places. How did those tours come about? And so was it after your time working in bars or was it before then?
Being in a bar or a restaurant, like really? The first few things, burp mic, happened to me. But I remember the first, one of the coolest first things that ever happened to me. I went to this place that it doesn't exist anymore. It's now Garth's building downtown called Friends in Low Places Bar. And it used to be a place called Paradise Park. And Paradise Park was just this awesome place for misfits on Broadway. And, nobody really knew it at the time, but like the place was like, it was made to look like a trailer park, AstroTurf, that like faux wood paneling on the walls kind of thing. And it was 2-for-1 pitchers of beer, and pitchers of beer for Natty Light were like $6, so you get 2 pitchers for $6. I mean, that went far.
That's a dangerous.
So tons of musicians were down there. And I just remember walking by one night and I was like, listening to these bands. Everywhere else is playing classic country and stuff. And I grew up on a lot of country. Like I tell you, my dad is a big country music fan, and I got a tattoo right here, Digging Up Bones. That was, the Randy Travis song that I would make my dad play over and over and over again in the pickup truck. And so country music is huge in my roots and upbringing. But I loved rock and roll. I love rock and roll. I still love rock and roll.
Yeah.
There's just something about just hitting an electric guitar and
power chord.
The walls shake, you know what I mean? And I was walking by, this band was playing, and I kind of went in there and was just messing around. And I remember in the front area of the bar, they had these little white plastic tables, like the patio table. That was their furniture, and smoking cigarettes. I don't smoke anymore, but I was just chain smoking cigarettes, drinking beer or something, and this guy came up to me and he was like, "Are you a singer?" And like, "What are you doing?" He just came up and started talking to me. He was like, "Oh, I'm a singer. I just moved to Nashville." Like, "When'd you move here?" I was like, "Oh, like this week." like just got here. And he's like,
"Oh, was that
that's
fast?"
Cool. Yeah, it was very fast. And if memory serves me right, it was very fast. It was like the week that I was here, or a couple days maybe. And guy's like, "Oh, I'm Cassidy," and it ended up being this guy named Cassidy Feasby. I haven't seen him in a minute. I need to catch up with him. But he, at the time, was playing in this band and stuff, and I was like, "Man, I really like your guys' music. It's different." Yeah, we didn't, we're just some buddies that like to play. We're not trying to do anything crazy here or whatever. And well, what are you doing in Nashville? Told him I don't really have any plans yet. I just moved here. I'm just trying to figure out whatever. Well, what are you doing tomorrow? You want to come with me to this demo session my buddy's doing or whatever? And I was like, yeah, sure. So fast forward to the very next day, I meet up with Cassidy, and we go over here off of Villa Place. And there's these guys hanging out at this house across the street, and I think some of the musicians were about to go to this demo studio, and a guy walks out on the house across the street at the other street, and he's just got a guitar and he's playing, and I was like, what? This is just musicians, like 12 musicians living in this house. This guy's over here on the porch playing guitar. I'm like, I'm definitely in the right place, you know. And Cassidy's like introduced me and goes, oh, you know, this is John and this is Matt and some of the guys living in this house. And then the kid walks out across the street over there and he's like, oh, and this is TJ. It was John and TJ Osborne, the Osborne brothers. But
no kidding.
They weren't the Osborne brothers at the time, but, you know, they were, you know, just brothers, and they lived in opposite houses across the street or whatever. And they were all, you know, either, I think TJ might have just graduated or was in Belmont or something like that. And Cassidy and John had went to school at Belmont, and Matt Utterback. And so anyways, they take me down to this studio somewhere down here in Music Row. And it was just like this house turned into a demo studio and a rat's nest of cables everywhere. And they're just tracking and stuff. And that was like the first guys that I met. And I started hanging out with them, and John and Matt and Kevin Weaver and Charlie Warsham and Donnie Fallgatter and Matheny. Why am I not remembering Matheny's last name or first name? But anyways, all these guys were in a band together called King Billy that was put together. And I don't know if you remember King Billy from way back then, but I think it was Trey Bruce was the producer, and he kind of put these guys together. And it was like a super group of kids from Belmont. And Charlie was the first spinoff, so he was already gone doing his thing, and then everybody has kind of done everything else since then. And I was just running around with those guys. Those were the guys I hung out with, and would ride in a van with them and go over to Tin Roof in Knoxville and sing BGVs and just, you know, help drive. And like, that was kind of how I started finding some of these cover bands and stuff. And then some other guys, Jeremiah and Hayden, another Jeremiah. This was funny because he was a brunette male bartender named Jeremiah, and I was a brunette male bartender named Jeremiah, and we would get girls that would be like, you screwed my girlfriend, you my friend over or whatever. And we'd be like, it wasn't me, it was the other Jeremiah, you know. There was all that going on. So we ended up becoming friends because of that. I walked in the bar one time, he's like, hey, I'm Jeremiah. I'm like, you're the other one, you know, or something like that. And they were playing in a band together. And so I started kind of like just filling in and playing music with these people, and opportunities kind of came up. And then years later, I was working at a place called Jackson's in Hillsborough Village, and you had to be a degenerate to work there. Like, I think that was a precursor. Degenerate and visible tattoos, you know, like you just had to. And I met so many great musicians there, working there with them, but then also the people that would come in there, you know, too. And one day, I used to play my harmonica a lot. I used to keep it in my pocket. And I was just standing there waiting on a table. It was my rotation for a table to come in or something. And I saw these people come in, and I was like, I want that table. I don't know why I wanted that table, but I want that table. Yeah. And these people sit down, and it was 3 Australians. It was 2 guys and a girl, and then there was like another girl that was with them. And I was like, hey guys, I'm Jer, you know, like whatever. And, you know, oh, you know, hey Jer, how's it going? You know, sure, we'll get some waters to start. And I go over, I'm picking up stuff, whatever, from the sidebar or whatever it was, and start playing my harmonica a little bit. And this guy at the booth is like, hey, come here. Can you play that thing? And I was like, I can try. He's like, you know, play a lick or whatever. So I whip a little lick. Oh, that's cool, you know. My name's Mick. Ended up being this guy named Mick Lindsay. And
just real quick, was it the Roseanne lick?
No, I was probably just like a, you know, a little honky honk honk, you know, like, yeah, I got this, you know. Yeah. I'm not a stud harp player, but I liked playing it at the time. Especially I could just pull it out of my pocket and just play it whenever. But so I ended up meeting them, and what are you doing here? I'm a musician from Australia, you know, like he was in town for probably CMA Fest. He used to come in town every year for CMA Fest. And so we just kind of became friends. And then, where should we go? I remember they asked me, like, where should we go? What should we go do? And so I told them all these places that I hang out. And so that week that he was here, that 10 days that he was here, I ran into him like 3 times.
Organically.
Yes, because I told him all these places that I hang out. I'm like, Mick, what are you doing here? There's a place called Whiskey Kitchen. Mick, what are you doing here? It's Tin Roof. Like, Mick, what are you doing here? It's Red Door. Like it was all these places. And so we just became friends, at that point. And then eventually Mick had me come over to Australia and tour with him. And I think one of the very first times that I went over there, I think I was there for almost 8 weeks.
That long?
Yeah, it was a really long time. Or maybe the first one was a month. And then there have been periods of time. I remember one of the longest times was almost 8 weeks that I was over there. And I was almost contemplating, like, do I just move and come over here and play music? And all of that. Leave my whole family and life behind on the other side of the world and stay out here by the beaches and play music and do all this. And so Mick was really a precursor to getting me over to Australia. And then also around that same time, I think it was around 2010, probably right before I met Mick, or right around the same time, I had an opportunity to go to London. And I was just staying at a hostel. And I remember I was going to London, and a friend was mine was like, I was like, oh, what hotel should I stay in? And they're like, don't, just stay in a hostel. And we think about hostels in a bad way over here in America.
Because of the movies.
Yeah.
Those are freaky.
And a friend was like, no, just go to one that has a bar in it. If you go to one that has a bar in it, you're going to make friends. You're going to have a lot more fun. And she was right. So I went to this one, and it was right on the River Thames. And I get there, and the first thing I do when I get there is the place is closed. So there's like a bar kind of downstairs that's open, and so I kind of crack my head, and I'm like, hey, how do I get in? I got to go to bed. I just got to London, like whatever. And and so they check me in or whatever, and then the next day I'm kind of bebopping around town and come back late at night, and I had been drinking all day, and I saw that the door was kind of cracked open because somebody had come out to smoke a cigarette or whatever. And at the time in London, the bars have to close at like midnight or whatever. And they'll do lock-ins where they'll, you can stay in there and they'll stay open, but you can't let anybody else in. And so it might have been like 12:15 or 12:30 or whatever. Because that's not late for us here, right? We're like, we'd be going to the bar till 3. So I poked my head in there like, oh, like everybody freezes. I remember I'm like, hi, like whatever. And then like, oh, it's just the American, And they had a little stage up in the corner, and I was trying to talk to some people or whatever. And my guitar was kind of in the little locker area on the backside. And I was like, hey, can I plug in and play? And they're like, no.
Oh, I thought they were going to give you like an ecstatic yes.
They're like, no, it's too late, like whatever. And I could tell they're just getting annoyed with me, but I was also hammered and confident, And so I go, okay, well, can I stand up here and play? And they're like, sure, brush me off.
Yeah.
So I stand up there and I start stomping and hollering, and everybody's just like what? Mm-hmm. Who is this guy? What is this? And the dude that was sitting there at the end of the bar, his name was Martin Furlong, and he had actually lived, a couple little apartments down the way. So this was like the local. So the bar, even though it was a hostel, was also a local watering hole for this area of town called Pimlico, and so that was like their local bar that they went to. Mm-hmm. And he was a music promoter, and he had helped book, all kinds of bands and stuff like that. And that was how I started working with Martin over there, and he had me over to the UK. I want to say at least 4 or 5 times, something like that. After that, it was like, hey, can you come back for New Year's Eve? Can you do this? Can you do that? And so that was kind of those two things were my journey to traveling outside of America and start doing stuff.
So those just came about by having your instrument and then just kind of hanging out at places where people were, huh?
Yeah. I don't there was no real science behind it. I saw a stage and an opportunity. I was like, I just want to play on that stage and do that. When I met Mick and those people, I was just working at a restaurant again, hospitality. I was in places where people go in and out of. And I think that's really big for musicians, especially when they come to town. And like, there are so many, like one of my friends, Andy Albert, who's a #1 hit songwriter now, he was working at a restaurant with me serving flatbreads. And I remember one night sitting there in the Gulch, I was bartending and he was the closing server, and we're just sweeping up. And I was like, man, and I sit down on this little bench area, and I was like, man, one day, Andy, we ain't going to have to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, we both don't have to do that anymore. So,
Well, fast forwarding now to the hospitality thing and
Yeah.
what your job is, one thing that I think all of us have to kind of come to terms with, musicians, if we're trying to make money, especially thinking about live music, is that it's it's a business. When you say music business, you're talking about using music as a vehicle for making money.
Correct.
And when it comes to live music, most of the time that means being the entertainment at a venue that sells drinks and
Yep.
food.
Yep.
And if you want to excel in those places, have a show that makes people want to stay and spend money
Right.
at that establishment. And that's true for artists, big established artists, as much as it's true for the local cover band or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
And musicians hate that. It almost feels like a death to their dreams a little bit to discover that that's the whole point of it. Is if you're going to play, it's because you're at a venue that needs to make money.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah, like ticket sales for even any venue, like, maybe you're getting the ticket sale portion of that, but the venue, the 5,000 capacity, Ascend Amphitheater down here or whatever, they're making all of their money on the concessions and the alcohol and all of those other things and all of that stuff. That's how they make their money. So yeah, even when John Legend sells that place out, he's selling popcorn and beer.
Yep. So was that a hard thing for you to discover? Because again, a lot of artists are like, oh, well, it needs to be all about me. You know what I mean? And so they have a hard time with like, no, we're actually running a business here that needs to make money.
I don't think I ever really thought about it that way at the
Okay.
time. I thought about it in a way of an opportunity to be singing and playing in front of people. While I was trying to learn how to write songs and develop what my artist career was going to look like
Yeah.
and what my sound was, I saw it as an opportunity to just be like, you can play music for a living? Awesome. I don't have to clock in somewhere. I don't have to take out the trash. I don't have to do this or that. I can just get up on stage, play guitar, sing some songs, make $100 hopefully or something like that. And that was good enough for me. But I knew that I was developing something with that. I knew that I could also have that as a well-oiled machine for my band.
Yep.
Right? Like I'm playing with these guys all the time. They're going to be my backing band. And that's what that was. It definitely was a way for me to manage things, to go, okay, now if I do go do this showcase at the Rutledge, or this is pre-Whiskey Jam and stuff like that, like 12th and Porter or Exit In and stuff like that, I already had a greased up band ready to go.
Yep.
So that was what was really important for me, I guess, was trying to just play music and be around it as much as possible. But I didn't really worry about the selling drinks portion until probably later, when the band was doing so well. And then I would start to see people just watching the band and not spending money. And they would say, well, Jared, the sales are down. Like you put on a great show. I remember having this conversation with the booker one time. You put on a really great show, but nobody's buying drinks because they're just sitting there watching you. And I was like, dang, I got to do other things.
Yep.
And so that was when I started developing different parts of my show to get people to put their drinks up, do cheers or do certain things, or, go talk to the bartenders, and just starting to put that banter in there. Because really, when I got on stage, it was just like, I just played music. I had to develop the entertainer side of it.
Yeah.
And how I was going to connect with the crowd and control the crowd for the environment of the time that I was playing.
And so now you're the director of entertainment.
Yeah.
And how many shows a week are you booking or overseeing?
I think we're probably around 360-ish right now, something like that. High seasons usually like around 380 a week.
Insane.
It's a lot.
And so what is your job like doing that? And then, because I know you... Burp mic part two. Burp mic. I know that you are someone, because I've seen it. You care so deeply, like you said earlier, about the artists. You care deeply about teaching people and mentoring them, especially those who are new to town, of what mistakes not to make, what paths not to go down because it's not going to be fruitful, right? And you are the one who's overseeing all these artists, and you're dealing with, is it mostly the singer most of the time? Is it the front man of the bands?
Yeah, but I also, I get to know. Sometimes I do have a couple band leaders that are not the or that are not the actual singer. Like maybe it might be the drummer is the band leader, and they put together a cool band. But yes, for the most part, it is the artist that I'm working with, because in that culture of the lower Broadway music scene and stuff like that, it's obviously our town is just driven on tourism, right?
Yeah.
Like this is where we get all our money for the city. So that's how we survive is tourism. So we got to make sure that the tourists are happy. But the tourists also want to see the next big thing.
Yep.
They don't want to just see, man, I saw this really cool band. I get people that ask me all the time, are like, I came to Nashville and you ever heard of this artist?
Yep.
And so I spend a lot of time working and finding and developing talent that has a passion for something other than what they're doing on Broadway. But they do that well on Broadway as well. They can entertain and they can do all that, but they're also working on their own album, or they're working on their own songs, or whatever, and trying to develop themselves as an artist. And those are the ones that I gravitate towards to work with.
See, I actually didn't know that even crossed your mind. So, and yeah, you're right. That's a way more interesting thing for tourists, right? To see someone who might be the next big thing.
Yeah.
So you don't want someone who's just trying to play cover gigs.
I get people
per se.
ask me about playing gigs all the time, and there are some that we do have some bands that are just really great cover bands that are really great, like party band or whatever you want to call it, that aren't probably putting out music or aren't doing it as often. But, I get people ask me all the time, hey, I can put a band together for you. And I'm like, respectfully, anybody in that band doing an artist project, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
There is a heavy entitlement for a lot of musicians that come to town that I play guitar, you have to hire me. You have to hire me on Broadway. I play guitar, I sing good. Mom said I sound good.
Yeah. So
It's interesting.
how would you recommend these different players go about trying to find gigs if someone comes to town and they want to make money doing something that they love?
I always recommend people going around and finding the bands that they like. I mean, that's what I did when I first came around. I'm like, oh, I went to Paradise Park because I saw this band that I really liked, and if I really like that band, maybe I'm going to like the people in that band. Turns out I like the people in that band.
Yeah.
Turns out that opened more doors. It was just smarter for me to put myself in a place where I was like, oh, I like this. I mean, they could have turned around and been a jerk to me or whatever. We all know that, but
Yeah.
I think kind of following any of those things is really good. So if somebody does come to town, go hit all of these stages. There's 100-something stages downtown now, but go down there and try to find the bands that you like and meet them and say, hey, I'm new to town and I really like your band. I've been all over and I really like your band. I really like what you're doing here. Do you have any advice, or when are you playing next, and start meeting the people that come to their crowd or meeting their players and stuff like that. I tell people that all the time. Just start to follow what you like. Not just the biggest show over here, that biggest show. Or just going to Tootsie's or Jason Aldean's or Barstool or wherever it is, just because it's a name. Go find the bands that you like, and that's how you're going to find your players, and that's how you're going to find. I say this all the time. You'll find your tribe. You'll find your tribe. The first 2 years of you getting here is finding your tribe and feeling good about what you're doing here. And you're probably going to be drunk the first 2 years.
And so it's not necessarily going straight to you, like trying to find someone like yourself.
People do.
Okay.
People do, but with the amount of gigs and the amount of venues that I work with, and the amount of curation that I do for my bands, for each stage, I have to, each one of my bands will have a different set list for each venue, because the venues have different demographics, right? If they're playing at Luke Bryan's, that's a different demographic than if they're playing over at Jason Aldean's. And if they're playing at Morgan Wallen's, that's a different demographic than what's over at Laney Wilson's or whatever. So you gotta have different set lists. You gotta have different sounds. Certain bands work here and all this. So I'm really, really busy nitpicking and curating who is going to fit here at this time slot for these people and this and that. And those people have already put in the development time. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to do as much development. Now, if a new person comes to town and they don't have anything and they need developing, I'm not really the guy you want to see first, you know. Mm-hmm. But people do reach out, mm-hmm. and I do try to find diamonds in the rough. You know, there's a guy that I've been working with, and I've been wrangling him for about 2 years now. He'll be here as of 2 years in, I think, June. Mm-hmm. And I remember getting an email from this kid, and I was like, man, he's got something.
Yeah.
He's a handsome kid. He's got a good personality. His email read well. He's got good songs. You know, he's got great videos already. That's a big thing. Already having your music somewhere as a business card for people to find you. Videos of you playing mm-hmm. live, mm-hmm. what you're going to do in that venue. You know, not as much as I want to say I would love to listen to everybody's original music. I can't judge that. That's why they don't do that on American Idol and The Voice. They don't know those songs. How do they judge that song? Mm-hmm. You know, they want you to sing the cover songs that they do know so that they do know how to judge those songs and mm-hmm. their opinion on how that, you know, how you actually approach this. So that being said, this kid I was like, man, there's something here with this guy. And he said he comes to town every once in a while and he's got a place to stay and blah, blah, blah. He was trying to get up here from Florida. And I remember driving to Publix, and it was almost 9 o'clock at night, and I just called him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, I don't ever call anybody, you know? Mm-hmm. And you know me, I don't like to talk a lot and waste my voice. But
yep.
But I called him and I was like, hey, I don't ever do this, but I'm calling you because you said that you want to do music, you want to play some gigs here, you want to do that. If you really are serious about this, you'll leave Florida and you'll come up here and be in Nashville. He's like, well, what am I going to do? You know, I'm like, play music, write songs, you know, and he made really good money playing in Florida. And he made almost better money playing in Florida. And he'll tell me that today. Like, sometimes I made way more money, but there was nothing really to compete against. You know what I mean? Yeah. There was nothing I said, okay, but what are you going to do with that? Do you really want to be a musician, or do you want to just play at these beach bars and these cover gigs and do this stuff? Like, you can do that. That's totally fine. It's 100% acceptable. But if you want to do something more, then you have to be here to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, can you get me gigs? I said, you get here and I'll get you gigs. And I had him, you know, 3 or 4 gigs a week by the time he already got up here, you know, mm-hmm. and he's been here almost 2 years now. Amazing. He is a little bit of a pain in the butt. I have to wrangle him sometimes because he spent the first 2 years drunk. You know, but in hindsight, though, you know, I know that he does really take a lot of what I say to heart and things. And we've had I've had to, you know, grab him and go, hey, you need to stop doing this. You got to fix this. You got to do this. You got to do that, you know. So I don't necessarily always work with people, but sometimes I do find people that I can see something that I can be like, okay, I can work with this. A lot of times I like for people to already be here and find their way into the scene and figure out what they want to do. Because, man, you know how it is as a vocal instructor. You might meet people that are doing this and they go, this is hard. I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. And they burn themselves out in 6 months or whatever it is, or they see that there's a challenge there and they didn't really expect that challenge to be, you know, as big as that mountain to climb over, to be as big as it is, you know. And that is where I had to stop spending time with people there. I had to find people that were already going to be here mm-hmm. for a year, you know, mm-hmm. for a year or two, that have already put in the work and have already shown progress and endurance and stability with their voice and their shows, that I can go, now I can work with you. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I do it now.
And what you're talking about is there's a lot of people who discover that they don't have that squeaky sound, by the way, is Brett teaching somebody.
If it comes through, yeah.
Because I think this bad boy is going to pick it up. a lot of people lose heart, and sometimes they lose heart because what they discover is that I really don't love this. Because the people who love it and will, will tell this story, and it'll be the last thing, kind of saving the best thing for last year, the most emotional thing. But people discover that I don't love this enough to sacrifice other areas of my life to continue trying to do music.
Sure.
And it's the people who truly love it, like Dallin last week saying, I was scooping dog crud, and he still stayed in it, even though that's what he was reduced to for this big session.
Yeah.
So you kind of sift through all of that by trying to hire people who are really committed to doing music, who have made this their life, like, passion.
That's the same. It's very much the same mentality of what I've said in several things when I watched that podcast and saw that portion where, like, I had to pick it up by hand, God, but I was working at that bar, that very first bar, and I would have to also, take out the trash and wash dishes and do all kinds of the dirty work and everything. Yeah. But also because it was a supper club, I had to have a pressed, black button down shirt and black slacks every day and stuff. And I remember one night I was taking out the trash and I was lifting it up and the trash bag busted. And all of that trash went all over me. And I was ready to throw in the towel. And I was ready to be like, nope, I ain't doing this no more, And I probably did go home being like, I'm gonna tell them I ain't coming in, whatever. I'm gonna tell them I'm not doing this no more, And I woke up the next morning and I was like, you can't. You just need to go in there and do it again. And double bag that trash bag this time and get a new clean shirt on and show up. You're going to feel better. And I did. And I went back and, just like him, saying, having to deal with this, I was waking up the next day and going, okay, I'm ready to show up with a smile on my face and do it again and do it again and do it again. And that's the same thing that I kind of look at when I'm working with musicians. When they work these bad clubs and they work these bad places that are, it's tough, it's hard, There's people that say that about specifically the Tootsies circuit, and their bars, that they're really hard, They don't pay as well. It's a lot of longer hours. There are some other issues with those places and stuff like that I won't go into, but there's people that come to me like, I can't do this anymore. I need to come, I've been here playing for them for 3 months, or whatever it is. And I'm like, respectfully, playing music for a living is not that hard. And if you can find the way to get around it and clean yourself up after that trash bag dumps all over you and do it again, those are the people that I know that are worth working with.
So in your position, again, the thing that I have admired the most as a singing instructor is some people wear this like a badge of honor downtown, and it's something that you protect your people from. But I've met people who are like, yeah, I moved to Nashville, a year ago. I've been playing 6 times a week. My voice has dropped a half octave ever since playing out here. And they're wearing their vocal damage like a badge of honor. I'm like, this is so stupid. You do not sound cool. You do not sound like someone that I would bet on, because you don't even realize you're damaging an organ that can be damaged permanently. So you try to protect your singers from ending up in a situation that you went through, I think, in 2017?
2014.
2014.
2014.
Okay, so something happened in 2014, and then a crazy thing happened in 2020 as well. So can you tell those stories, man?
Yeah. So in 2014, and this was like really, man, it was my first year playing music full time. The bar that I worked at closed for remodeling. They were rebranding and stuff, so they were closed for like 3 months, so they laid us all off. Yeah. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just go play music, and I did. And so I was playing a couple places downtown, and I was playing on the road. I was doing a lot of the Tin Roof circuit at the time, which was only probably like 6 bars or so at the time. Now they're probably like 30 bars or something like that across America. And I was doing all of the things wrong that, my doctors over at Vanderbilt told me later don't sing when you're sick, don't sing when you're drunk, and don't sing when you're tired. Buddy, I was sick, drunk, and tired every day. And I was singing on that, and back then, and I had in-ear monitors, but nobody really understood how to use them or how to sing with them and stuff. And I grew up in the wedge monitor era, real amplifiers on stage at all of these clubs, full drum kits, no baffles on all this stuff. So I was just around loud environment 4 days a week, and playing 4 hours a night, gassing it, playing rock and roll, going, let me show you how high I can hit this note. And it was basically around May, I started noticing some issues of 2014. And then June was okay-ish, but then right towards the end of June and going into July, I started noticing I just like hit a wall, and like it just was not happening. I was just singing from my neck and my chest a lot, and then eventually I was on stage, and I went to sing, and nothing came out. And we were only
just no sound, huh?
We were only about an hour and a half into the gig, and my drummer at the time, who's a phenomenal singer himself, I was able enough to like sing the low parts for the verses, sing, talk, sing, and then he would come in and sing the choruses. And we knew something was absolutely wrong. And so then I went and got scoped at the Vandy Voice Center, and they said that I was so inflamed in my throat and my neck that they couldn't even see what was going on with my vocal cords yet. So they had me go on 30 days, voice rest, no alcohol, no smoking, no vaping, no anything, no caffeine. And I was on steroids and stuff to get the inflammation to go down so they could see what was going on. So I did that, and that was over my 30th birthday. And so my 30th birthday, I had like a little name tag, hello, it's my birthday. Couldn't even talk. And I went back in there, and they finally looked at my voice, and they're like, yeah, you have all these, blood vessels in your vocal cords that are showing up, and there's some yellowing, which is bruising and stuff like that. So we think maybe you hemorrhaged one of these blood vessels and whatever, and we'll get you through speech therapy. So this went on. That was July. This went all the way down to like, I finally did a private gig in October. So I had to go back to working at a bar. I worked at a bar, and I was bar backing silently. I had a small dry erase board in my back pocket, and I was just stalking the bar and doing that until finally I could start to bartend, and even with a little mini dry erase board, or just reading lips and stuff and not talking.
When the 30-day thing happened, were you kind of like, oh no, like what have I done?
Yeah.
Was that already kind of like a shocker?
Massive shock. Like, okay, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe you're just inflamed and this just needs to go away. I didn't think about like a polyp or a nodule or nodes or anything like this. I didn't think about that. I just thought maybe just something just was I just did a little bit too much, sprained it, if you will. And then in October, I went and did a private gig, and it was only a 2-hour event or something like that, and I got through about half of it, and the same thing happened again.
Oh, no.
So I knew something was really wrong, and went back to Vandy, and they were finally able to, they were still scoping me. We were still doing speech therapy, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. I think we need to go in. Here's what we can do. We can either do more speech therapy, and then if that doesn't work, surgery, and then speech therapy, or we can go do surgery and then speech therapy. And I'm like, well, I've already done several rounds of speech therapy, so it hasn't really worked, right? Yeah. So I was like, all right, doc, well, take me in, So we planned that. It was December of 2014, and I went in, and the procedure was a lot longer than we thought at the time, because they thought that they'd go in with these lasers and just turn off these leaky blood vessels. Turns out the leaky blood vessels were feeding a polyp behind my vocal cord. So when the scope is looking down, it can really only see the top side. It couldn't see what was happening under here.
Yeah.
And so I had a polyp that had formed behind, filled with blood and tissue and stuff. And so the doctor had to come in and cut it open and remove all of that tissue and things in there. She said it was kind of like the inside of a grape, that type of textured stuff that's in there, and then trim off the excess. So then, I had like 2 vocal cords, right, that are supposed to line up straight, and I had one that was like this.
A bowed vocal cord.
And then it had to grow back. So now I tell people that I have a 12-year-old vocal cord, and I have a 42-year-old vocal cord, 41. Yeah. So this one's still a teen, this one's an old man. And my voice would break still, and it still does. Sometimes it cracks. Like I attribute that a lot to, well, this one is newer. It's fresher tissue. It's had to relearn everything. I mean, I had to relearn how to speak. And so in that time, then I couldn't speak for another 30 days. So in that 6 months, I didn't speak for 60 days. 30 days at the front, 30 days at the end, 60 days out of 6 months. And I think I told you, I was like, that was my year of, like, that was my eat, pray, love year, I didn't drink for 6 months. I went and started boxing. I was working at this bar and put all my energy there, and was like, okay, well, I'll just make this place cool and fun. And it was definitely something that was so traumatic. And I've been working to get my original voice back for 12 years now, which I know that I will probably never really get to the 100% of what I sounded like when I was young. Who does, right? You just get older and your voices change. And I've come to grips with that. But I also realized, like, I can fix some of this stuff, I can do some of this stuff. But that was a big thing for me. And it was such a more intense vocal procedure than most people will ever go through. And that's what I've learned over time when I hear about other singers that have an injury, even bigger singers that have had injuries, that a lot of them don't go through the stuff that I went through. And I was just an independent artist. I didn't have a record deal. I didn't have a record label. I didn't have a team behind me. I didn't have no money. I didn't have anything, It was definitely a journey that I just don't even wish on my worst enemy,
And so during that time, were you reevaluating, like, what am I doing in Music City? What am I going to do moving forward when my voice recovers?
Yeah, I definitely was I took about 2 years off, and I went back to entertaining, but I did it smarter, and I added a fifth member to the band. I added a female to the band. And now whenever you see me play live, I always have a female vocalist, and we'll trade off the higher notes and stuff like that. She'll do, I'll do the harmony and stuff like that. And just started developing. I started working smarter instead of harder, and putting on shows and working out keys of songs. And like it taught me, like, hey, just because the song is recorded in that key does not mean you have to sing it in that key. But that was the type of guy I was. I was like, I don't know, that's the key of the song, that's what I did it in,
And the thing is, you could hit the notes.
G. Yeah, yeah. But then after surgery, I couldn't hit the notes. And even now, like, you will never get me up to karaoke, unless I know the song and I know the key of the song, what we're doing it in. But there's no way you'll get me up there to do it now. I'm like, I'm not prepared for this. I really prep for everything now.
But knowing your voice, you're choosing your moments, because you still do hit some pretty epic high notes in your show.
Yeah, I do choose mine. Yeah, and some of the things that I've learned over time is like, and maybe from you and from other vocal instructors too. But it's like, you're trimming off a little bit of life every time that you go for those big notes, right? You're now, okay, you started out at 100%, now you're at 90. You did it again, now you're at 80. Now you're at this. And to be able to finish the show the way that I do, with some really big vocal moments, is I can't get past 75 in a 3.5 hour show. If I get past 75, I can't finish the show the way I want to. So I really have to pick and choose. So I'm only going, okay, now you're only 2% down. Like, I'm kind of mentally watching that as time goes on throughout the night. And even between songs, I'm using straw and water phonation. I'm doing vocal cool downs. I'm actually, like, if you see me up on stage, I'll have my back turned, but I'll be like stretching my neck and doing things to keep me maintained to get through the rest of the night.
But no one watching your show would know that you're doing any of these things, really, because, like you said, your show is a well-oiled machine. And so while you're recouping or whatever, you've got your bass player who's like screaming his brains out, doing like an epic rock song. So there's your show is just so seamless. So you can kind of regroup in between. So
that's kind of what I like to do. Like, I want to keep for the environment, for the entertainment thing, I don't like a lot of downtime. I don't like that. I like for people to just be entertained the whole time. So, okay, the song's ending, I'm on the talk back, and I'll say it like 3 times. I'm like, like Copperhead Road, Copperhead Road, Copperhead Road, because they may not be paying attention, and as long as I can give them a cue or whatever it is, we'll know that we're going right into that, right into that, right into that. So that is seamless. Hey guys, what do we got? What do you think that they want to hear now? Are we going to rock and roll? Are we going back to country? Are we going to pop? What are we seeing? And I'll try to do that for the last, 60 to 30 seconds of the song, so we know what to go in next. Okay, yeah. Keys F. Okay, oh, we got to come up one. You know what I mean? Like, it is constant movement, and it's constant communication with the band the whole time of like, what are we doing?
Yeah, there's never
no guess of like, I don't know.
But people who don't know anything would just think, oh, this band is really good and whatever. There's never a loss of momentum. And so I'm hearing you that happened. You came back into music. You got a lot smarter about how you do things and everything. So now from 2014 to like 2016, was that your kind of hiatus or your?
It was kind of a hiatus. I did some stuff. I went over to Australia for a little bit. I went and did a tour as a utility guy. I played with my buddy Johnny Gates, and he was in a band called the Runaway Saints at the time. And I played mandolin, and I had to learn that in the back of a 15-passenger van. And I played acoustic guitar, electric guitar, harmonica, BGVs. And I just was like, I needed to be around music, so they hired me to do that for like I think about a 21-day tour, and we were opening for Johnny Lang on the West Coast. So this was right after vocal surgery, and I went on this. So 3 months after vocal surgery, I went on like it was almost 78 days that I was away from home, and I went to I went and did that tour, got back. Actually, a transmission went out in that van in Jackson, Tennessee. On our way back, the very next day, I had to jump on a flight and fly back to LA to go to Australia. So I was like, I got to get back to Nashville. We're only 3 hours away or 2 hours away. I was calling friends to come pick me up. Luckily, we got over there.
I was thinking you might have hitchhiked.
I traded my gear out. I got my acoustic rig set up and everything. Repacked my bags, went over to Australia for several weeks. Came back. Then I went down to the Keys and I did like a songwriter tour. We went to Key West Songwriter Fest, and then we went to Key Largo. So I was 15 days down there. By the time I was done with that, I was like, this was right after vocal surgery. So it inspired me. And I was like, I just spent like 75, 78 days playing music professionally right after this. All right, you can do some more stuff. And so that kind of, once I was doing my entertaining again and rebuilding that, I started working as a side player for other people, and I started playing guitar, and then I started being an MD, and I was the tour manager. So I was doing all of these things, helping everybody else. Then I started writing songs with different artists because I was like, man, I loved writing songs, and I was working with all these other artists that it really started helping me become a way better songwriter because I was helping them do their art. And in that time, I really kind of got subdued as an artist. I kind of was like, no, I'll get to it. I'll get to it, man. I'll put out a thing or two.
You put yourself on the back burner.
I did. And then a friend that I was working with, Caleb Lovely, he was like, man, you got some really great songs. So we went and recorded like 5 or 6 songs at his house over this little project that we did. But then I was embarrassed by my voice. I wasn't confident in my voice the way it was sounding, that I didn't want to put them out. So I sat on them. And then in 2020, this massive tornado came through and blew my apartment apart while I was asleep. And I lost my home. And, my vehicles were totaled. And I literally just got back that night from a run in Florida. I'd been driving 16 hours that day, got back, put all my stuff in the wash, and woke up to an exploded apartment, and kind of had to start putting my life back together. And in that time, there was a moment that was like, you could have died, and your music wasn't out there. Put it out, man. So then I started putting the music back out,
Well, your life was really spared, man, because the tornado hit Germantown really hard, and that's where you were living at the time. Like Jessica and I my wife would drive by, a lot of people just curious to see what the damage was like. It was insane. And it did claim, I think that tornado took like dozens of lives in its trajectory from Nashville through
through
east.
I-40. Kind of followed all the way through, past Cookeville over towards Knoxville and stuff. Yeah, it was a heavy time, and it definitely desolated a whole area of Nashville that nobody ever thought would happen, And so, and that time was rebuilding. And that time too is when I met my wife. We were basically a COVID. We met right before that happened. We turned into a COVID couple, and then I was still working with this other artist, and I was writing. This is when I started spending more time writing and working with other musicians. Also, after that, when 20 to 21 was a really bad season for music and everything was shut down, I had to look at it and go, there's something else I need to do, you know? And so I had already been kind of consulting while I was playing my gigs downtown, and I was working as a consultant for the third party booker at the time. And the guy had offered me the job many times, like, come down here and work for me, you know, whatever. And I kept turning it down because I didn't want to live downtown and watching bands 70 hours a week and doing that. I just didn't want to. My voice was it had already taken a toll on me, you know. And in being in that loud environment, it's very hard.
Yep.
So I was like, I'm not ready for it. So eventually, again, in 21, he offered me the gig again, and it was great money, and I could stay at home, and I could still play. And I was like, all right. So I took the opportunity. And that was the precursor job to what I have now, where I got kind of absorbed by that company that he worked for about a year or so in. And that was how I started doing, you know, the director of entertainment role, where I am now, developing talent, curating talent, and really setting up this music community, kind of re-identifying the music community here in Nashville on Lower Broadway and all of that stuff.
It's such a crazy ride, bro.
I mean, to go from a log cabin in the woods,
Yeah,
to all these things, to hear that, you know, vocal injury, I didn't go to college. I was a tool and die maker. Like, sometimes I have to look at it and go, that really was my life, you know? And, you know, it drives me. It drives me to want to be better. It drives me to want to be a better artist. And then I started coming here to, you know, work with you. From a recommendation of another phenomenal vocalist, Bo.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, he showed me one of your clips and was like, try this. And I tried it, and my voice already sounded better from one of his lessons. I was like, well, I got to go see him in person. So I started coming down here working with you, and then we became fast friends.
Fast friends, yeah.
And, you know, you're like wanting to hear this story about this guy, you know, and it's really cool. You know, you and Paul, I started taking guitar lessons from. My wife and some other friends are like, every time I'd come in here and I would sing a song, you know, at the end of Benny's lessons, he'll usually have you perform a song, right? Yeah. And I would play these songs, and he'd be like, whose song is that? And I'd be like, oh, that's mine. And I don't know how many times you would say that. You'd be like, dude. I remember one day, dude, you were like, dude, you need to put these songs out. And I was like, yeah, I'll get to it. I had kind of gotten subdued again because I was so comfortable just writing songs and helping people that I had kind of covered up my artist identity for a little while. And I was good entertaining, but I was like, do I go and put these records out? Who's going to listen? And, you know, you gave me the kick in the butt, and several other people did. They were like, you need to go do this. And I can't thank you enough for inspiring me to do that, you know?
And I wasn't even thinking of it as a kick in the butt or whatever. It was just, I am becoming a fan of your music as you play it for me. And I'm thinking other people would be fans too. So
awesome.
I think I made the comment like, you're too good at this not to be putting music out, you know? And with your voice, you know, there's times where you're like, okay, this person's a songwriter.
Yeah.
And they really need other people to sing their songs, but not you. When I would hear your songs, I'm like, man, people need to hear your voice doing this kind of thing.
I appreciate
you know,
that.
and you're also, I think a lot of the people that I gravitate towards tend to be really generous spirits, you know? So definitely, you know, Kathleen and Dallin are, and you are too. And so you'll put people before yourself. You'll put your buddies before you.
That's very big over here in your community with, you know, Singing Success and with Brett and Jordan and yourself and all the other coaches. It's like it's not just come here, learn, let's make money off of you and try to coach your voice. There's other things that are going on here that are like, hey, you can be a good person for this and do that. It's very supportive, you know?
Well, thank you. And that comes from Brett, even though I think we all have that spirit in us, you know, we'll do things and just hope to break even. Because what we're really trying to do is just serve people well, you know. So with our industry nights, you know how much I believe in you, man.
Yeah,
so
I appreciate it, man.
You
had me do the industry night too. Yeah, it was a really good time. Yeah.
And you're putting original music out,
Yeah.
and with your last release, with your last several releases, you've been picking up some momentum, and I was
Yeah.
so hyped for you, man, when you released the last one to see that it was on New Music Friday.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
there
yeah,
we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
I'm
They're
like, come
starting
on.
to. It's interesting. I'm learning how to be an artist again, especially in this era, especially at 41 years old. Too, and to go, like, well, there's no real age cap on this if you can put out awesome music and stuff that you believe in.
Yep.
And that's one of the best parts about this is like it's completely self-funded. I'm finally doing the things that I want to do the way that I want to do them, and there's not a suit in the way to tell me that I can't.
Yep.
And I think that that's going to speak, and it has spoke volumes about the art that I create and the people, hitting me back on the music, like, dude, this is cool. And sometimes I wonder if there was another person in the way of this, would it sound like that? And would it
Yeah.
would it be the way that it is? But I get to do it the way that I want to do it this time. I think I put in enough,
Yeah.
put in enough work in the past journey that I can finally go and say, hey, I can be me now. I can do all that. And it all started by you guys, kind of telling me like, hey, you need to put some of this music out. And I went and I remember Paul saying, just go do 3 songs. You'll be all right. Just go do 3 songs.
Yep.
And now that's turned into about 15.
Yeah.
And in that duration too, we've been filming a documentary of my life over the whole time. And it all started based on doing, behind the scenes video for the recording. Mm-hmm. But then when Ryan, the guy I've been working with, started hearing all of my stories, he was just like, I would want to hear more of these things. And for me, I was very much shy about it at first, going, it's just this crazy thing that I did, like whatever. And then now I hear these things back and I'm like, this is kind of a cool, crazy journey life that, yes, it is the best and worst roller coaster ever in the world. And I think I told you the other day, I hate roller coasters. But again, I wouldn't take any other ride, Would you do it again? Yeah, I'd probably be a little smarter about some things, but I would do it again, If that said I had to be where I am here today.
Yeah.
Right?
But some people choose a safe life. And then what they tell me when they've retired is, I wish I would have done X, Y, Z. And again, you said you would have done some things smarter, but there's no, I wish I would have taken a shot at my dreams. You're doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing it, man.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you're helping other people do it too, which is just so beautiful. And again, an extension of that is you telling your story here today, man. So, and you doing the social media tips as well. I have people telling me like, man, I saw that one and I've got to do, like, I can't wait to meet Jer one day so I can ask him even more questions, So
well, any tips? I'm trying to go through my brain all the time, like, what do people want to know and stuff like that. So if you're watching, comment on their hair, I'd like to hear more about this or whatever. It helps me, make more content for people to give them. I make no money on that. That is literally just something that I wanted to do for the community and help people, because I knew that there's nobody doing anything like that in this town.
Yep.
Even here on Music Row, I'm sure there's plenty of things people could talk about, but people haven't really broke into that yet. So.
Well, man, let's do another one of these that's just about that particular topic, because I know that we could just talk about that for hours and hours, if we get into the nitty gritty of it. But thank you so much for being here today, brother.
Thanks, brother.
Love you, man.
Love you too, dude.
And we'll talk soon.
All right, man. Thank you.